Welcome to the show, Pam.
Hello.
When I talk about what a story you have to tell, can you briefly explain? Welcome back to Ladies of Another View, and on today's show we have a couple guests that have been on before, two of my favorites. Matt Vadum is my favorite Supreme Court reporter for Epic Times.
No
He's my only one, but he does an excellent job, and he's going to talk about some of what's going on there right now. For the lighter side, we have something that Lori loves. We have a trivia and news Q&A. Look at how excited she is. And you can play along at home. But first, I want to welcome back to the show is Pam Garfield-Jaeger. She has written a book called Gender Distress, Tips and Tools for Families, and she worked with young people in California, and what a story she has to tell. Welcome to the show, Pam.
Hello.
When I talk about what a story you have to tell, can you briefly explain that you were out of the mainstream of social work for about 8 years. You call it your Rip Van Winkle syndrome. Went back.
It was a little less than that, but yeah, about 4 years.
4 years, okay. But oh my gosh, in 4 years then it was a whole different world, right? Tell us just briefly about that.
Really almost like 3.5 years, things just radically changed from the years 2017 to 2021. I was out because of a physical disability, and when I came back in 2021, everything was so radically different. My colleagues were just completely aligning with whatever the kids would say. About half the kids were identifying as trans, and my colleagues were just saying okay and encouraging pronouns. Of course, I was in California, so there's still masking, excuse me, and all of the COVID policies. We were wiping down chairs, even though everybody knew that this was an aerosolized virus, but we're dealing with people with mental health issues and creating anxiety. It was mad.
Okay, so I want to complete your introduction because in California, we're a state licensed clinical social worker. We'll get into the next segment. We're going to talk about why you're not in California anymore. But you have a website, thetruthfultherapist.com.
.org.
Yeah, so that is important to be, if you're going to offer therapy, you want to offer the truth alongside, right?
Yes.
But let's dive into your book right now. It really is about gender distress and helping families. Yeah. I know some people that are dealing with this and they don't know what to do, where to go. You can't even trust therapists anymore. So tell us a little bit about this book.
Yeah, so I've written this book really out of all of the experience I've had as a social worker, working with families, working in clinics and group homes with kids, working in schools. I've had so much experience working with teens who have behavioral issues and working with families in family therapy. And I saw, like I said earlier, my profession changed so radically that I felt like I needed to put out there a book for families to understand how to handle these trans issues because the therapists were completely captured.
Yeah, I think your book was just wonderful on how it's teaching. I mean, it's such a good tool for parents to understand what's going on and be able to talk to their kids about it, because when what you as a social worker, you get put into a back corner sometimes because if you do not gender these kids right, you possibly can get taken to the medical board and risk losing your license. And it all goes back to who is on that board, because they might not like what you say, even though, like we always talk about, if you're an anorexic, you can't tell them that they're, fat. I mean, there's just these basic lines. So, I mean, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, so what you're talking about, they've messed with all of the terminology and they're calling that conversion therapy. So if I as a therapist do my job, which is just to explore what's going on with a person and maybe help them understand the truth, I'm now considered a conversion therapist. And if a client files a complaint, I can be in trouble, and it depends on who looks at it, and I could lose my license. That's why a lot of people are silenced.
So this seems like a really good handbook for parents and probably teachers, anyone that really wants to know more about the subject and how it is manifesting in their communities. But what are some of the warning signs that parents need to look for, or caretakers of any kind, that your child is kind of being lured into this?
Yeah, I actually have a whole chapter on this, warning signs. And one of the biggest warning signs is when your child is really engrossed in the internet. If they won't talk to you and they need to talk to their online friends, if their behavior starts to change, their dress starts to change suddenly, they become kind of despondent. They don't accept values in the family that they've always accepted before and start calling you names and saying you're a transphobe. That's an obvious one. But sometimes they do a little more, subtly, and they just say, "Come on, Mom." And they act really frustrated with you. And if they're getting more and more withdrawn, that's a sign.
We had a conversation when you were on before, because you were part of the movie Disconnected, which I highly recommend to anybody. Yes. I think there were 18 different people that were interviewed, and Disconnected is spelled with a Y, kind of getting into the really what is going on here. And you made a point, and you were still in California then. You said this isn't just affecting the kids who are identifying as another sex, but it's identifying their whole population, the whole generation, who could have a girlfriend one day and now he's a boy. And schools saying don't trust your parents, that this is messing with the minds of our young people. Do you want to comment on that?
Yes, I believe strongly that this is affecting everyone, and that's why this is so important. It's not just about the kids who identify as trans. This is about dividing families. This is about their peers who feel very unstable. This is about society as a whole. We need to live in truth.
And we can't let, like you said, those kids, if they're getting online, and let that internet just overtake them. I mean, you have to be engaged with your kids and know what is going on.
For sure.
Well, you have a chapter too on, some of the therapists out there, and I saw that in the movie Disconnected. It was so obvious with some of these folks, but they're actually manipulating the parents. They go into the whole straw man argument that, what do you want, a dead daughter or a live son kind of thing. What is that all about?
Yeah, unfortunately, they're being trained to say that. So that's coming from the top down. And our profession is just so ideologically captured. And many of them are so empathetic that they forget to think. So I believe the empathy of therapists is being weaponized against families. So yes, I have a whole chapter to warn families about how a therapist who might seem nice and really have good intentions could really tear your family apart and send your child onto a lifelong path of medicalization.
It really is an excellent book, because it cuts through what you think. Like you just said, it sounds like empathy, sounds like you're caring, civil rights type issues, but in reality, Pam looks at what is actually happening and what is the ultimate outcome of this. So when we come back, Pam's going to give us some examples, and she's also going to let us know what chased her out of California. So don't go away.
An evolving town with small town charm and big city amenities. Come visit us today and discover everything Ellendale has to offer.
The agency in Beach would like to thank you for trusting their dedicated team of agents with your personal, commercial, farm, and ranch insurance needs. The Agency Insurance, coverage for what matters most.
Fortuna, North Dakota is your destination. For adventure, for hunting, for sports, for agriculture, for family, for fun. Welcome to Fortuna, where you're not a tourist, you're a new friend. For more information, visit cityoffortuna.org.
Pembina County Memorial Hospital provides quality care for all ages, including physical and occupational rehab services. Clinic Care can handle your physical or behavioral health needs, and the new ER entrance is ready for urgent care 24/7. Wedgwood Manor Skilled Nursing Center provides quality care for every stage of life. The Pembina County Memorial Hospital Association has you covered no matter the need. Why go further when there's so much so close?
Are you looking for something special or one of a kind? At Bassett Motors, we can help you find exactly what you want.
Come on in and experience how small town hospitality and personal service can make car buying a pleasure.
We know interest rates are important to you. We have multiple lenders to negotiate your lowest payment. Visit us on Highway 281 in Carrington, North Dakota, and online at BesetMotors.com. Beset Motors, where our customers send their friends.
Hey y'all, it's Trent on the loose. I want to tell you, Lady Blue and I, we got a lot of miles together, but you know what? You and I got a lot of miles together as well. And all I want to do is bring to you the information on how we maintain a domestic supply of food and fuel for future generations. So I'm going to continue to travel the world and unearth the stories that make it possible that we can live in a free United States of America.
Now you can have the personalized forecast at your fingertips when you need it. Bek's exclusive Weather Insight is information tailored to you. Radar, weather alerts, forecasts, and videos. Download the free Weather on Bek News app. Search your app store now.
Farmers and ranchers, thank you from the team at Agra Insurance in Beach for trusting us with your crop, hail, livestock, and rangeland coverage needs. Agra Insurance Inc., your crop and hail insurance specialists.
Welcome back to Ladies of Another View, and I want to welcome back our guest, Pamela Garfield-Jaeger, who is a licensed social worker, worked in California, saw a lot of the stuff we're talking about with transgender, where families get cut off, and the supposed professionals have this tsunami of control and separate families. Welcome back, Pam.
Hi there.
Before we get started again, I want to let everybody know that your website is thetruthfultherapist.org, and Pam had to go out on her own because she couldn't be a therapist in California and speak truth. So she is thetruthfultherapist.org, and her book really is for everybody, especially for people dealing with this, but gender distress, tips and tools for families, because this is affecting everybody, even people in conservative states. It's in the schools, it's in the politics, it is in the media. And Pam, can you give us a little bit of insight about what you saw and maybe some success stories?
Yeah, so I became public as the truthful therapist, like you just said, and I ended up befriending some people who were even identifying as trans, and over a year or two, some of them detransitioned. There's one comes to mind. This one young woman who she saw how Big Pharma was taking advantage of her during the COVID era, and then she realized, well, wait a second, what am I doing injecting testosterone? I'm dependent on Big Pharma for that. And that kind of woke her up, and she went on this long journey, I guess, to recognize that she is truly a woman, and she really came to appreciate her womanhood, and we became friends since then.
And I want people to, how do they find a therapist? What is questions that we can ask to make sure that they're not going to follow this gender, that they're gonna actually get to the root of the issue that is happening, and that they, let's say the kid is thinking of that gender. How do we find the right therapist?
Yeah, I have a whole chapter with several questions. But some of the few highlights, the things that are really important, is you need to make sure that you find a therapist if you're going to work with a therapist, because I actually encourage parents to not just run straight to an expert, to actually trust yourself and believe in yourself. But of course, some families do need outside help. So if you're going to do that, make sure it's a therapist that really involves the family, that will involve you, that will not shut you out. Because what therapists are doing is they're dividing children from their parents. They're turning their kids against them. And that you want to make sure that you don't find a therapist that's going to put that wedge between you and your child.
Can you just quickly, I hope everybody orders your book, but just real quickly, a couple tips here. What would you be looking for if you're going to look for a therapist? What kind of questions would you ask?
Yeah, so I mean, one big question you could ask is, what kind of impact do you believe the internet has on youth? And if they kind of say, well, it just helps them find their identity, then that's a big red flag. Because that is actually what the trans activists are saying. That is actually what I learned in a training. If they spend a lot of time on YouTube, that actually helps them figure themselves out. So there's one red flag. You could ask them, of course, what do you believe if someone's born in the wrong body, and ask them, how they can explain that and what do they believe. Ask them how they can explain this phenomenon on of the rise in trans? Do they, where do they think that's happening? You could just look for pronouns in their bio and flags. Those are some really easy ways to rule out, unfortunately, a lot of therapists.
Wow.
Well, you've kind of given us some ideas on what you're seeing out there now, but you were in California, and there were some reasons you left there. Care to share?
Oh my gosh, I was saying earlier, you don't have enough time on the show for me to sit and list all the reasons, but I'll talk about one of the biggest reasons that really set me off, which is there's this bill that I testified against. It is now passed, it is in effect. It was AB 665, and we who are against it called it basically the state-sanctioned child trafficking bill, because they now allow 12-year-olds to consent to their own residential treatment for mental health. So a child could go to school and tell their school counselor that they're having conflicts at home, and the school counselor can decide that you are not a fit parent and that your child needs to take a little break and go to a group home, and then you as a parent have to fight to get your child back. So the government is really after dividing families in California. So that's one big reason. But yeah, I could go on.
I'm 12 years old.
Could you imagine? What do you think the big agenda of this? I know it's like breakdown of the families, but they're taking control of these kids. I mean, the consequences of the actions of if they get on hormone blockers, if they do surgeries. I mean, I know it's
big money,
but the mess that's going to happen when you come in 5 years, 10 years, it's just like, where are we going to be?
Yeah, I mean, you said it. Money is I think one of the biggest factors here. And I think you guys know this. When a lot of policies are placed, they're placed in a way that someone feels good in the short term, but they don't think about the long term, like you're just saying, what's going to happen in 5 years. They're not thinking about that when the people who feel good about passing these laws. I think the people who are behind it know, and they're after money and power. And I mean, I can only think that they're trying to destroy our society, the fabric of our society, because they just want us to not know what a man and a woman is, what a boy and a girl is, and tell all our children that our bodies are inconsequential.
It's truly an evil agenda, and I mean that because look what it's doing, and so much harm so quickly. When you say this happened in 3.5 years, for some reason I was thinking it was a lot longer than that.
Yeah.
To have the world turn upside down in 3.5 years, you think, what are people's thinking and values? What are they based on that you could create this tsunami of an agenda and take so many people in its wake? Obviously there's money involved, but I mean, have you ever sat down and said, how did this happen and how did it happen so quickly?
Yeah, I'm sorry, you can go on. I mean, people have written long essays about this. How did it happen so quickly? I think that this ideology has been rooted for a long time. The people who had been speaking out against it had been canceled, had been made examples of. So if there was this fake consensus that this is the way, that people trust experts, and it just kept going and going, and now we're seeing the fruits of them silencing the voices like mine.
Well, and we have an administration that empowers them, and that's an unfortunate reality as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we only have less than a minute, but did you experience a lot of backlash in your own professional or personal life?
Yeah, I mean, because I had this disability, I was already displaced. But then, yeah, when I became public, most of the people that I was friends with before from my profession, other social workers, I don't talk to them anymore. That's actually not just because of this issue. I also, spoke out against BLM and some of the COVID measures. And so, my opinions are not popular among social workers. So for sure.
Wow.
I also worked as a social worker for a while, and so now when I hear somebody say they're a social worker, I'm like, oh, really?
Yeah.
Same.
So, but thank you, Pam, for speaking out. It really is important, and I know you did take a lot of backlash for that, and I really encourage people to get your book, Gender Distress.
Thank you so much.
And when we come back, we're going to visit with Matt Vadum, who has the Supreme Court beat for the Epic Times, so don't go away.